Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle, and this is the Church Planting Podcast. I have the privilege of serving as president of Stadia Church Planting, where we believe that every person on the planet deserves access to a thriving, growing, multiplying church. Today, I'm so excited about this because I have two very personal friends on this episode, John Sypek and Steve Porter. We've been friends a long time. We've been part of the same local church. We're golfing buddies. We share life together. But today, they're coming in their capacity as business leaders, highly successful business leaders, each of which has scaled companies, have grown national markets, and bring their skills now to the church world. They've been incredibly influential with Stadia and in the local church setting, as well as helping many, many church planters. They're going to be talking with us today about generosity, about finances. And friends, there's no one I would rather hear from than John Sypek and Steve Porter. Let's join them right now. I have two very dear friends with me on this episode, Mr. Steve Porter and Mr. John Sypek. Hey guys, it's so good to have you with us. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Greg. Great to be here.
Yeah, and we've been friends for a long time, actually, and it goes clear back. Long before I was president of Stadia, you both were very actively involved at River Tree Christian Church in Northern Ohio and experienced the growth at the church with us, and actually were, big parts of all of that growth and the processes there as we remember all that history. And Steve, thank you so much for making time today. You serve as chairman of the board of the Stadia Church Planting Board these days.
Yeah,
and
it's been fun. It's been real fun.
Yeah, and you've been fantastic. But Steve, let's start off with talk about you're a business leader, and that's what you've been. I mean, you're so active in ministry now, but you've been a business leader. Tell us a little bit about your business.
We are a manufacturer of industrial, food service, and food processing papers. I started there in 1982, right out of college, and had a degree in accounting and management, and went to work running a waxer because in 1982 you couldn't find a job. And about 11 months after I was there, my current business partner and his family bought the business. They felt like they could not do the business without me, knew I wasn't happy with where I was at, and offered me a piece of ownership. And now it's my wife and myself, my two sons, and my business partner that own it. And we have a lot of fun making paper.
It's crazy. I've been out to your plant and seen what you do. And it's all those, it's all those things that you go, oh, somebody has to make this. What are some of the products that your paper's in that people would be familiar with?
Probably the easiest one to think of is the Philly cheesesteak. So when you go in the frozen food section and you see the steaks interleaved with paper, or you go in the deli counter and the cheese is hanging there and there's a little piece of paper in between all the cheeses. When you buy a lot of backside stuff that you don't see is when pizzas are made in these plants, they use our paper to carry it to the end of the plant, throw the paper away, and put it in a box, and we go to the store and buy it.
Yeah, and I love that you guys are in that business, but it's really you view that, I know, your business as a ministry as well, and we're going to get into that later. John, let me come over to you because you're in a whole different business. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I started off 1 year ahead of Steve, 1981, and I started with Roadway Express as a dock supervisor in Chicago. And the great thing about that company, when I hired on, they said, they will promote within, and if you earn it, you'll have an opportunity. And so moved 8 different places throughout the United States, was able to get to the role as Senior VP of Operations, and then left there in 2011, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that, and then had a great opportunity to become president and CEO of Area Wide Protective, AWP, a traffic control company based out of North Canton, Ohio, and servicing 22 states in the United States as we speak right now.
John, you were one of the first people when I transitioned from senior pastor of River Tree to the president of Stadia. You were one of the first people. Do you remember we sat down at Starbucks together?
Yep.
and walked through what's a transition plan look like for a new organization. And I'm still grateful to that because I implemented much of what you shared with me
Yep.
in that first year of Stadia. And I guess that's really what I want church leaders to understand is we have men and women like you guys sitting in our churches that are enormous resources and assets. And we so often don't tap into you guys, and you have so much to offer. Steve, let's talk about, you have an accounting background. And over the years at River Tree and even at Stadia, that has caused me no end of heartburn. In a good way. In a good way, right? But talk about that and some of your frustration with me as a leader. Just let's be real candid about this over the years.
Yeah, I think that, from a business person's perspective, one of the things that was tough for me when I was involved at River Tree back on the finance team and the financial team is people make budgets and they know what they want to spend. And so we're just going to make the income match it because we can't go negative. And as a business guy, I'm saying, no, it doesn't work that way. And every church organization and nonprofit that I've been involved with, they budget that way. And it's like, guys, under promise and over deliver. You got to do it the other way around. What's a realistic approach? Because there's this people that are 100% faith and they're all the way over here. And you got people that are 100% business and they're all the way over here. Neither one is right when you get into this blend, but you got to be somewhere up in this 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock range and meet to say, yes, we want the faith, but we also want to have sound business practices, especially when, as a church, you're going out and asking high capacity individuals and stuff for money. Well, you better be a good steward with it because they're going to catch up to that later, sooner or later. And it's going to be a hard ask to get that money.
Yeah. And so, a couple of things come to mind, Steve. One, Stadia doesn't operate the way we used to operate at River Tree, let me say, right? Our budget is on the mark now, and you guys make sure of that. And obviously I've found great value in what you've taught me over the years, and that's been important. The other thing, Steve, is, I'm not an accountant. And, but at the same time, you were the leader who said, Greg, you can't oversee this size budget and not have a financial understanding. And as a result, I went to Cornell University, took some, classes and not that I don't have your skill set now or anything, but I can certainly read spreadsheets and understand them. That wouldn't have happened if not for you speaking into my life as a leader.
Well, I think it's probably the biggest disservice for any pastor that's going to come up in a church. And it's not so big a deal when you got 25 people and you're starting out. But as that church grows, it's the biggest disservice when a pastor doesn't understand balance sheets, income statements, financial reports. And you guys don't get that training, it seems like, anywhere. And every pastor I've ever been involved with doesn't get that training as they're coming up. And it would be something I would suggest to any church plant. My son-in-law is at a Stadia Church Plant. That's where we go to church in downtown Canton. And he doesn't understand it. And he tells me all the time, can I come over and sit down? I want to go over this. Tell me when you think how I should do this and teach me about it. And when should we bring this person on? Because I don't think we can afford it right now. What's the thoughts? And it's been great. And he's running the black ever since. And he's doing a great job of managing it.
Okay, John, you sit on multiple boards as well. Has that been your experience with not-for-profits as well in churches?
Yeah, and I would take it. I'm certainly from the accounting finance side, but I looked at it, and that was my biggest awakening and probably frustrations when I joined a fair amount of nonprofits. A church, a nonprofit, it is a business. And so you have to approach that. And you've got all these resources that are available that are looking for ways that they can be part of the ministry. And when you think about, I said, Greg and Steve covered the finance part, but there's human resource issues, there's hiring issues, there's risk issues, and even business planning. And I say this in jest, but have been very close to you and been very close to Jason, very close to Corey, all have great vision of what you want to do, but sometimes you need to break it down and what's the objectives in 1 month and 3 months and 6 months and what needs to happen and who's going to help you get there. And it's like, no, I just want to be, sometimes I get the feeling we just want to be there in 6 months, but you have to have a plan to get there. And I think those really come in when business leaders and what I marvel at is we all have we love being asked and we love being part of it. And it's just, just ask us and we'll help and not overstep, because in the same way, I've learned a ton from the nonprofit leaders and the pastors of helping me go into my business and having a heart for ministry in the business world. So I think it's a great two-way street.
John, I don't want anyone to miss that. Because Steve, I saw you shaking your head in agreement.
Yeah.
If somebody would just ask us, we would be happy to help. And I guess I would just, is that really true? I mean, if church leaders, would come to you as business leaders and say, hey, would you help us with a business plan? Would you help us with our accounting, with our human resources? That's something you guys really would feel good about helping with.
Absolutely, and it's guys like John and myself. We're at the different stage of our careers. We've been charging all our lives. We're getting to that point where we're kind of winding down, handing it off to the next generation. And the reality is, we're kind of bored, and we would love to use our talents to come in and help an organization and say, these are some things you can do from the business world side of things. It's kind of like over the years, Greg, I think it was probably one of the biggest things that caused you a lot of frustration is when I'd say, but remember, this is a business. And the answer would always be, no, we're a church. The backside of the church is a business, and you've got to run it like one.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to get to that point of understanding, Steve, and understanding what you're saying. And, as I lead Stadia now, I'm just so grateful for the things that I've learned from you guys. Hey, you're both very, very generous leaders. I want to talk about your generosity history. Steve, let's start with you.
Okay.
You're one of them, literally, I mean, that's one of the things that people would say about you that are around you that I hear. Steve is one of the most generous people I know. And you invest in multiple ministries. You invest heavily in Stadia and church planting children. Talk about, how did you get there? How, was the church involved in it? What happened?
Oh, absolutely involved. For me, I never really did much of anything until River Tree was going to build a building. And I sat there. I mean, you probably remember the day. It was the day I met you. And I went to my car. I went to leave. Couldn't leave. Wrote a check for half of what was in my checking account. It was the exact amount you needed that day for the building.
And I didn't. I mean, that wasn't something that, like, I had, made people aware of that, but no one knew. That was complete surprise when you gave that check.
Right, and I didn't know the amount. Nothing. I can remember my wife's face when I went home and told her. She was just freaked out about it. She couldn't believe it.
But she was happy.
Happy freak out. Happy freak.
Yeah. So, Steve, that was just the beginning, though. I mean, what's going on in your heart at that point that led you to the next step?
It was. Everybody was telling me, "Hey, you got to pray about this when you hear things," and I'm like, I don't feel the need to pray about it. I just had this like twinge in my gut when I knew it was something we should do, and so Pam and I started reaching a different point in our lives financially. And we got to the point, I mean, there was a year we gave 100% away of what we made. And it was just things that came up. If it was heard about it, we gave to it. And so the funnel was huge. And as we started to grow more, we started to realize, boy, our passion is really about kids. Went on a mission trip down to Ecuador with you. And we really saw that funnel start to narrow. And for us, that funnel went to all about kids. So if it was kid involved, we were doing it. I mean, you originally asked me to give to church plant. I'm like, Greg, I don't get that. It just doesn't. Went down there, saw what a church plant did, and how many kids in a compassion project that was being sponsored through that church, and it just blew my mind. And that kind of got the funnel really started toward kid focused things. And if kids are involved, we're in.
Yeah, and so you and Pam have been so generous in helping plant. I don't even know, Steve. It's countless now churches over the years with Stadia and sponsoring multiple children with Compassion, lots and lots of children with Compassion International. But you told me no once, and I want to talk about that story because I remember I was sitting at Starbucks with you up on the Strip area up there, not in Vegas, but in Canton, Ohio. We have our Strip, and do you remember that?
Oh,
Yeah,
oh yeah.
tell that story a little bit.
So I had become one of your go-to guys at River Tree, and we were starting to develop this friendship, and and but it got to the point that the only time I heard from you is when you needed something, and I thought, you know what, this guy's abusing this, and I know he really needs this money, and you know what, the answer is no, and I'll never forget the look on your face when you said, "What do you mean no?" And I said, "I've done everything you've asked of me, everything you've asked for every kingdom project, church, kids, you name it. I've done it. But I think you need to go figure this one out on your own." And I'm out. And the look on your face, it was like, I mean, somebody just ran over your dog. I mean, it was crazy. And I think you learned a thing from that. I think that really deepened our relationship after that because you knew I wanted more than just to be the guy that writes checks for you, and you were looking for the same thing. But in your youth of that time of being a pastor, it was different. You weren't looking for that because everybody wants to be the pastor's buddy. And
Yeah. So,
so it's really
I think probably, Steve, for both of us, that was a turning point in our relationship because I think you did see then over the next years how much I do care about you and Pam and your kids. And obviously, you're one of my absolute dearest, closest friends today and love you so deep. We vacationed together. Our kids we're growing up together, right? So I'm grateful to you but that was kind of a test of the relationship. It was, hey, wait, am I just about money to you, or do you actually care about me and my family?
absolutely.
And I think that's a great lesson for those of us pastors to learn is, hey, it's here's the way I look at it now. I never look at people as a source of money now. I look at them as people who love Jesus, and my job is to help disciple you in any way that I can into loving Jesus more. And sometimes that may involve your resources, but that's up to you, right? And if you want to get involved in a kingdom investment opportunity, great, but I want you to know that I'm going to care about you anyhow. John, let me switch over to you now because you and Rhonda are incredibly generous, and you're big Stadia investors and church planters now and give to multiple ministries. What's been the story, your story?
Yeah, I mean, I would first, as I thought about this question, because you had to prep me, give me a week to prepare for this. But it's first recognizing truly that Jesus is generous to us. So that's where my generosity started, and it was. I lost, when I went through my business history, I lost my job in 2011 with Roadway, so I was a year looking for a job, and there was nights that both my wife and I, Rhonda, were on our knees because we had 3 children in college, and they chose pretty expensive colleges to go to, a 4th about to go to college, without a job, and a pretty nice house at that time. And I hadn't been out without a job for 31 years, so it was like, wow. And just asking and promising and praying that we would do our part. We would do our part. And then there was a significant sermon by Jason at River Tree during that time period that really resonated with Rhonda and I. and it was all about the three letters NMO, not my own. Everything we have is a blessing from Christ. And as you both of you know, I mean, it's the name of my house. It's on my golf shoes. It's stenciled on my golf shoes, and then honestly, I was fortunate, great success with my new company, and and I had Steve Porter as a mentor. I mean, I can't say it any clearer than that. I mean, it was just fun hanging and learning and getting part of that. And truly, you hear a ton of people say this, and I truly believe it. The more we give, the more we're blessed. It's amazing because I went through a significant opportunity in 2015 with the company and really started me on my our blessing campaign, and then just recently went through another one, and it's like, all right, so it's I've got to continue to do his work as the best to our abilities. And so, I mean, I really believe that, you know, I hate saying this, but it's like as much as I give away, it just seems more shows up, and whether that's time, talent, or financial, I mean, it just those opportunities are there. So that's kind of been a little bit of our journey.
John, let me stay with you for just a second. How do you and Rhonda decide where you're going to invest your kingdom resources?
Yeah, so that's funny because Steve will appreciate this because I'm a little bit more the business side in the family. Rhonda's the heart side of the family. And every year we sit down in January and we have a budget. I haven't made that budget. I've always somehow she and I figure out how to surpass that budget, but that's cool. That's fun to do that. But ours is focused really. I'd say in two areas up to this point is students. I mean, we have a great passion for students, especially living in Canton and the opportunities we've had to work with the inner city schools and really nonprofits that are faith-based, that are really trying to bring people to Christ. So whether it's the church, Stadia, River Tree, you know, Refuge of Hope, those type of organizations that are really trying to bring people closer to Christ, not hit them over the head with it, just, you know, watch how we walk, and hopefully you'll understand why we do this. And that's kind of where we stay focused. And I think recently, it's interesting the timing of today's event. Rhonda and I have had a few conversations. Is now we want to move a little bit down the roads for some individuals and individual families to maybe there's a message that we can get one-on-one to help people out, and they'll see why. And maybe smaller, but more of them to bless people down the road.
That's awesome, John. Steve, how about you and Pam? How do you make your decisions?
You know, Greg, it's we've been doing this so long that part of it is there's really 3 or 4 ministries that are on our hearts big time, and that's where most of our dollars go. And you know, the Stadia, the children's home, the church. One of the youth things that John was just talking about with the inner city camp.
Yeah, cast. Yep.
And you know, we're kind of different. I bean counter by trade, but I don't count the beans when it comes to giving money away. I've never been one of these people that said, you know, you have to give away 10% or give away 20%. If there's a need and it's there and we feel compelled, we give, and we don't track it. It's probably the only area in my life that I'm not a bean counter, which is really weird. And like John, I mean, I've experienced the same thing, is that and I'll give God, and the more we give away, the more that we've been blessed in all areas of our lives. So it's been just crazy.
Okay, let me just open this up. I think we need to ask this question. So lots and lots of church leaders listening to this right now, watching this. How can church leaders help leaders like you with generosity? What are some good things that you'd go, hey, this is a good thing to do? Or maybe this is a bad thing. I mean, Steve, we've talked about it's got to be about the relationship, and you got to make sure people really matter. Are there any other words of wisdom you could give to church leaders?
I'll go first. One thing I would say is don't be afraid to invite them into your dark secrets and what's going on at the church. You know, a lot of pastors don't want business leaders to see that budget or see the things that they're doing. Invite them in, and invite us to be involved, because like most high capacity givers, their money follows their involvement. If you just keep asking me to give money but you shut me out, I'm going to shut off the faucet of the dollars. I want to be involved. I want to know that you're financially sound. It's one of the things I love about being involved with Stadia is, you know, from time it transitioned away from provision and became its own. I was part of that board with you, and we have been very diligent about making sure that it's in the black and it's running properly. And we've made cuts when we had to make cuts. They weren't easy. They were tough. But like I told the guys in your discipleship group that time, all young pastors planting churches, guys, ask. We want to be involved. We need something to keep that fire going that we've been doing for 40 years. And we're kind of on the other side of it. But we want to be asked. We're not going to come thrust ourselves upon you or try to change you. We know we have some experiences that can help.
Yeah, so church leaders, don't miss that. You're hearing it. Ask. They want to be involved. How about you, John?
I mean, I'm going to echo a little bit what Steve said. First of all, it's important to me that the pastor and Greg, you know, I've been blessed to be that when I moved to Canton, you were my pastor, and then it was turned over to Jason, and then I've been fortunate enough to work with Corey, Steve's son-in-law, pastor at 3rd Street. It's like, and I will say this, and not because you're on the screen, it's like, you have great vision. You really do, and you bring great vision to us, and so that excites me. But then, you know, it's not a traditional charity asking for financial. When number one, you take interest in me, in building a relationship, and I think Steve touched on that earlier. And when you ask me to get involved, well, now guess what? I'm part of that. So why wouldn't I invest in something that I feel I'm part of? And I think that's really, I can't say it enough, because, you know, I'm the oldest gentleman on the screen right now. And I sit in, we have, you know, I'm a member of book studies in a couple groups that people that are older than me are in, and they have that question. They're always saying, you know, what do I do now? And they're great faith-driven men and women. And if they were asked, you know, a lot of blessings will follow with that, because the experience they have. And it's, even if it's little projects, even if it's a one day event, or, hey, can you help me with this? Or can I just get your opinion over a cup of coffee? That's important. I mean, you and I don't drink coffee, but you got me to Starbucks, and, you know, it's like sitting down there and just saying, hey, help me with this plan. I mean, well, now I'm part of it, and now I'm part of Stadia in that way. And so, you know, it's easy for wanting to make an investment in something that I believe in and I've been asked to be part of.
Yeah, and it's, you guys are both, you know, likable guys, so that makes it easy for me. I like hanging out with you, and we're all golfers, so you know, I mean, we cook together, and you know, it's a lot of fun. Steve,
You know, Greg, John just said something too. Is that if we want to get involved, it doesn't mean we want to be for the next 5 years doing something. It could be, hey, you know, a week recharges our batteries, or a half a day thing with somebody in your staff that you want us to help.
Yeah.
That can be enough, and it gets that ball rolling, because we're in the trenches with you and involved in it.
Okay, we just have a few minutes more, and 3 questions we're asking all of our podcast guests. So, number 1, Steve, what do you wish pastors would do more of?
Yeah, and I know it's hard for you guys as pastors, because there's so many people, but you develop the relationships deeper on a more permanent basis. Not, I'm mentoring you for this next 24 months and you're gone. We want to be involved. You know, you have time in your life for 5 real good friends. true friends, and then you got a little bit of time for the next 5 people. So outside of your family, that's it. We want you guys to be in that group, and that's how we like to get involved.
What do you wish pastors would do more of, John?
I would say I'm big on listening to your vision, and when you have a chance to talk about it, and when it's real, it's not a campaign, but this is why we want to plant churches, and here's the evidence of the children that we're blessing, and whatever, and just to add on to what Steve said is when you invest in the business leaders that are within your community or your church, don't underestimate that there's other church followers that follow those same leaders or are friends with those same leaders, and they're going to be able to quote drag them along and bring them in. They have influence on who else is going to church, and because we all know there's certain people in certain churches, if they like the choir or they like the music or they don't like it, can influence a lot of other people in that church. The same thing works here, is if you invest in those key relationships, because if you're a church of 200, you can't have 200 key relationships, but you could probably have 20 or 30 of key leaders within that church, and that'll spread its tentacles there.
Steve, what do you wish pastors would do less of?
Less of. Man, that's a tough one. I don't know. I guess sometimes, sometimes you feel like when I told you no,
Yeah.
I felt like that's all you were doing was asking for money or asking for something along those lines. That it got old fast because that's all it was. So moderate it with, when you ask, don't always go back to the same well, or if you have to go to that well, make sure it's not only the well that you're ever coming after.
Yep. That's gem right there. Make sure it's not the only well you're coming after. There's other water that this person has to deliver and needs filled up. That's brilliant. Thank you. And John, what do you wish pastors would do less of?
I think at times, especially when they're new churches, you have 10 or 15 different things that you want to accomplish. And from my side, I get frustrated when people have 10 or 12 things that they're going to do and not one of them get done well. And I'd rather see 3 or 4 things, and then if the 3 or 4 don't work, I have more respect that you put investment into those 3 or 4, and if you tapped into some resources. But it's like sometimes I think it's like flipping a page. Like if I'm away from church for a couple of weeks at the beach and I come back, I'm like, wow, we're on to something else already. I mean, weren't we going to do something here? And so I think it. Not everything's going to work. I get that. But sometimes the things you try to do too much at one time.
Great advice. Okay, Steve, one last question. What has been one thing a pastor has done that has been especially helpful to you?
Cared about me. I mean, you invested a lot in me early on. It meant a lot.
And it'll keep happening, my friend.
No doubt in my mind.
In both directions. John, what's been one thing a pastor has done that has been especially helpful to you?
Taking a personal interest, been real with me, and has been a friend to me, and that's it. I mean, that means a ton to me. I'm not just an attendee. I'm real to that person, and we share the good and the bad and the things that we're going through. And growing up, I grew up Catholic, and the priest was on that pedestal, and you never thought you could approach, or likewise they would share with you some of the things they're going through. That means the world to me.
Well, you guys both know I love both of you, love your families, and thank you so much for taking time to be on the Church Planting podcast, for investing in my life, in Stadia, and really just in God's kingdom throughout the United States and around the world.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.